Mercedes has only 2 races left to achieve what's been their sole goal for the 2022 season, and that is to win a single race. Hamilton is facing the first winless season of his career, while Mercedes hasn't had a winless season since 2011. Although the team has proven to be very competitive in the previous 2 races in Austin and Mexico, they are likely to meet major problems in the Brazil GP when it comes to beating Red Bull and Ferrari. So what is the major issue that Mercedes will face in Brazil? Hamilton has been able to finish second in the last 2 GPs in Austin and Mexico, proving that the W13 does indeed have potential, and it is stronger than the F175. However, the issue remains winning a race this season, and Ferrari isn't their main competitor here. Red Bull is. Verstappen doesn't seem to slow down anytime soon, and one of the reasons why Mercedes missed out on the first win of the season is the botched tactics in Mexico. But we'll get to that later in this video, as we want to present the bigger issue that Mercedes will face when it comes to pushing the W13 first through the finish line. The Mexican GP is held at a very high altitude, around 2,285 meters above sea level. What this means is that the cars are having issues with the cooling system as well as the aerodynamics and pure performance of the car. This was the main issue as to why Ferrari struggled in Mexico, as Sainz and Leclerc qualified and finished P5 and P6 respectively. The Maranello team was nowhere near Mercedes when it comes to qualifying and race pace, and they are looking forward to leaving the 2022 Mexican GP in the history books. However, Mercedes was far from perfect too. Their engine has suffered from power cuts, which were explained by the chief of tactics, James Vowles. According to him, these power cuts have appeared due to the fact that the air is rarefied at this altitude, and when the driver asks for more power when he presses the throttle, not enough air enters the cylinder and the power isn't delivered instantly. Therefore, the power cuts issues have prevented Mercedes from having a perfect car for the qualifying session and for race day, which is something that they desperately need if they want to win the first race of the season. How is this going to reflect on them in the Brazilian GP? The Interlagos GP is held at a much lower altitude compared to the Mexico one, at just 800 meters above sea level. However, this will be a huge challenge for Mercedes due to the fact that this isn't a track that suited their car in the past. Nevertheless, Mercedes is expecting to struggle at this GP in the upcoming week, and this is something that has been spoken about by Vowles. First, let's hear his explanation for the engine cuts and how this can apply yet again to the W13 in the upcoming GP. Instead of having an engine that is really highly tuned, you are back into a condition where you have to do lots of work with the power unit in a very short space of time to try and map out these irregularities. I am confident all teams will suffer this. It won't be unique to ourselves. It's typically accentuated in qualifying because you are very quickly and rapidly applying throttle pedal, which means that the turbo and fueling systems need to keep up with that change very quickly, and normally it's better in the race. It can be tuned out in time, and where we got to in the race wasn't a bad position. I think qualifying was worse, but still enough to cause a small amount of performance loss for both drivers. Therefore, this is the first part of the puzzle that will cause major issues for Mercedes in Interlagos. For the sake of the narrative, we are setting Mercedes' goal to win in Interlagos. Initially, they would have to be extremely lucky or find an extreme amount of performance in order to beat the RB18. Verstappen doesn't seem to slow down anytime soon, and even in seasons where Mercedes was utterly dominating the F1 sport, Red Bull was able to win this race on multiple occasions. James Vowles spoke about the race and its requirements of it, saying that his team won't be able to perform as well as it did in Mexico due to the downforce requirements of the track. When talking about this issue, Vowles said, "I think there are a few factors that came together at the same time. The first is that we put a large update kit on in Austin, and that did move us forward, and that evidence was even more present really in Mexico. The second is that we are very good when we are running maximum downforce and others running maximum downforce as well, and that was evident in Zandvoort, in Budapest, for example, and it was no different in Mexico. How it performs across the next two is hard to tell. Obviously, in the case of Mexico, it looked a little bit like that Ferrari actually dropped back, and I suspect that won't be the case as we move forward. But what's even more depressing is the approach that Mercedes has for the Mexico GP when it comes to the fight with Ferrari. After the latest 2 GPs, Mercedes were able to prove that their car is more powerful than the F175 of the Maranello team, with the Brackley-based team cutting the lead to the second spot in the Constructors' Championship to just 40 points. Although Wolff recently said that for his team, it would be much more important to win a race rather than win the P2 spot in the Constructors' Championship, it goes without saying that nothing would delight him more if his team is able to grab the extra prize money that comes with the P2 spot in the Constructors' Championship. James Vowles said that the team won't be as dominant as they were in Mexico, and he expects that Ferrari will be much more competitive here rather than what we saw in Mexico. I think this will really vary track on track. Ferrari won't be that far back and away from us as they were in Mexico. They will be closer in Brazil and in Abu Dhabi, and it will be a very close fight between our two teams. In terms of relative to Red Bull, they still hold the edge relative to us. I don't think it is quite the 0.3 they outqualified us by, but it will be a few tenths across the next few races. It's really hard to tell before we go to an event, but I don't think we will quite enjoy the same level of competitiveness. It won't be much different, but it might be a slight step backwards, and I certainly expect Ferrari to be closer than they were in Mexico. And yet again, Mercedes needs to pay more attention to their shot calling and strategies. The team has struggled a lot when it comes to this aspect of the race, and we heard both drivers call for the soft tire compound in Mexico due to the fact that Red Bull was much more competitive on the mediums. Mercedes hoped that the Red Bulls would have to pit again and that they would outrun them with the one-stopper strategy. But when the team saw that the performance on those medium tires wasn't slowing down and they had a very short window to react, nothing was done from their side. Hamilton and Russell kept saying that the hard compound tire didn't feel right, and the team did nothing but hope that Red Bull would pit again and Mercedes would outpace them. This is something that cannot happen if you want to win the first race of the season, because it's evident that the only way to beat Red Bull is to outsmart them in the pit stop or outside of the track. Of all teams, Mercedes should know this better than anyone else, given the fact that they dominated the sport for 8 consecutive years. What did Wolff have to say about the botched tactics in Mexico? Simply put, they got it wrong. We were pressured with Lewis to do that pit early. We didn't think that the medium would go until the end. It was totally surprising the way Perez hammered the tire and it was still holding on. So we just got it wrong. We discussed whether the soft-hard combination was a viable one-stop strategy, and we thought it's never going to go that far, so the soft-medium wasn't even on the radar. With that being said, it's evident that Mercedes will struggle in Brazil. The only positive on their side is that rain is expected to hinder the race conditions, meaning that the team will have a chance to outsmart their rivals if they get their strategy right. Other than that, they are left on their own, and they are likely going to crush some negative records after 8 years of straight dominance. What do you think will happen with Mercedes at Interlagos? Let us know in the comments below.